Get through this together. My name is Miranda. I'll be talking to you today about second language identity. So hopefully you want a second language identity, or you're interested, or you just wondered what in the world this crazy girl would be saying. So I'm very happy to be here today. Before we start, this thing doesn't like me. We'll still get through this. Before we start, who the heck am I? Obviously, you want to know who the person talking to you is. My name is Miranda. I am a semi-proud Texan. I used to be a little bit prouder, but recent election situations have made me a little sad about Texas. My undergrad was social work. My master's, I got a master's at 전남 University in 한국어를. I am Harsh's 선배. Harsh. So, which 한국어교육 is either Korean foreign language education or Korean second language education, depending on. So it just means Korean for foreigners, I guess. I've been in Korea since 2009, so I don't know if that's a long time or not, but here I am. I've worked in both hagwons, and I was an epic teacher in public elementary school for a bit. And I am currently a part-time teacher at Yeongdong, which is a Korean hagwon in the area. So that's who I am. Hopefully, nothing I've said so far has made you angry. So let's go ahead and get going. So first of all, I want to talk to you about words. By the way, I'm kind of old and I don't remember things, so I'm going to keep looking. Just forgive me. I want to talk about words, you guys. There are some interesting things about words that you don't think about until you start studying languages. But a while back in a class I was in, they were talking about snow. I'll just tell you now, there's only one word for snow in Texas, which is because it doesn't snow in Texas. Yeah, okay, nobody here's from Texas. That's okay. Anyhow, we don't have any snow in Texas, so we just generally freak out. Well, Anna's from Texas. Okay. Okay. But there's only the one word for snow, which is snow, or oh my god, we're all gonna die. But in Korean, not in Korean, I'm sorry, in another language, languages by like up in the north where people see snow continually in like Canada and Alaska and higher and deeper into snow country, there are lots of words for snow because they've got lots of snow, right? Like in Texas, we don't need a word for snow other than snow because we just don't see snow. But in other places, they have lots of words for snow because they got lots of snow. And the interesting thing is when they did research, if you showed me two different types of snow and said, Miranda, what's the difference between these two types of snow? I would pretty much just say, I don't know. But those people can tell you, oh, this one is slightly stronger, or this one is bigger, or this one is something. And so it is this type of snow. And what they have determined is your language that you use actually changes the way you think, which is kind of cool, right? So Koreans, I have found, have a lot of words about study. I can't imagine why, but there are a lot of, like jasip. I never heard the word jasip. There's not a concept in English, right? Free study. Like in English, it doesn't even make any sense. But in Korean, you have all these terms about study because you study all the time that we don't have in English, and we never will have in English because we're kind of lazy about studying. So your language changes the way you view the world around you. And the word 언니. This is a really interesting word for me because I am several people's 언니 now, and several people are my 언니. And the relationship I have with them is not the same as my friends, if you can believe that. So, but when I came to Korea, I didn't speak any Korean, so it didn't matter. But now that I speak Korean, I often have to call older women. I have to choose. Either I will call her 언니, or I will call her 쌤, or something. And when I choose 언니, once I've made that choice, the relationship I have with that person is no longer the same relationship that I have with my English-speaking friends. And this is why. The word 언니 immediately says that person is older than me. It typically means that we have a slightly closer relationship. If I call someone 선생님, typically it means our relationship is more formal. But if I'm saying 언니, there's only a handful of places that particular word can get used. I can't use that at the hagwon with the other teachers. I can't use that at work or at church typically, right? I use it with people that I'm very close with. When I say friend, friend is very non-age specific. I often don't know how old my friends are. When I find out, sometimes I'm shocked, which is impossible in Korean. Also, typically, 언니, it seems strange to me, but my 언니's can tell me things in Korean, say, Miranda, you need to do this. And the relationship is set up in such a way that I typically just do that. Whereas if my English-speaking friend said, Miranda, I don't really think that skirt looks good on you. I don't think I'd wear it again. I would probably say, excuse me, I don't think I told you you could talk to me about my body, blah, 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 blah. But if my 언니 does, I would probably say, 언니 알겠어요. 네, 나중에 다른 거 입을게요. Like this, and just be done, right? but in English, there's no way. We both have the same amount of authority in that relationship. And to some extent, I have some 동생s, I feel the need to take care of those 동생s. I want to feed them, typically take care of, because most of my 동생s are from school. They're poor college students. I feel like I should be feeding them. So I'm often, 나랑 같이 와. 우리 뭐 먹자. 뭐 네가 진짜 밥 안 먹지. Like this, and then we do our thing and we're okay to go. I would never say to an English-speaking friend, I don't think you're eating enough. Come on, we're gonna go eat. Like I would probably just say, do you not have money to buy food? Like what's wrong with you? Don't you have a job? Go get a job. So my relationships are directly impacted by whether I choose to call that person friend or whether I choose to call them 언니. And I guess that some of you in here have similar experiences. And Harsh and he has to call me 선배. Yes, you do, Harsh. And that directly impacts the kind of relationship we can have in Korean. But in English, we can pretty much say whatever we want to, which is why he always tries to use English, and I never let him. So if that is something that's happening in my relationships, imagine what an entire language would do to my self-identity. Once you start learning a second language, now I'm not talking about Korean students, you often learn English at school. And this is not what I'm talking about. Lots of times we learn, I learned German in high school, theoretically. I learned some German. I do not speak German with people. I never did. I learned it in a textbook because I had to. And I never used that in the real world. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about languages you learn and use in the real world. They impact who you are. So, let's have, as I said, a look at Miranda, the Korean speaker. Korean-speaking Miranda is not as articulate as she would like to be. Often, these days not so bad, but often I would start sentences and about halfway through think, I don't know the grammar that I need to finish the sentence, and just stop. And so, Korean-speaking Miranda is not so articulate, and due to that, not well understood. A lot of times originally, 95% of the people I talked to had no idea what I was saying because I'm just saying things, right? You just, pop, 있어요, like this, and they don't know what it means, but I'm so hungry, and I just really want. So, I'm misunderstood, which leads, by the way, to me getting extremely frustrated, right? We can all, I'm sure any of you that have spoken Korean I've had several meltdowns and quickie smarts where I'm just, why can't you understand me? Okay? And often, because I'm saying weird things with an accent, I'm not taken very seriously. So, Korean-speaking Miranda can't articulate herself, misunderstood, typically frustrated, not taken seriously, and sometimes just starts shouting. Yes, sometimes just starts shouting. If you put all these together, what that really means about Korean-speaking Miranda is, she's a teenager. Korean-speaking Miranda is basically like a teenager. Think about when you just don't understand me. Why? And you're just kind of putting words out there when you were a teen. It's what my life is in Korea. Okay? So, this is to say that when we create our second language identity, in my case Korean, we begin with loss. You lose a lot of yourself to begin to speak a second language. Basically, my favorite researcher in the field of sociolinguistics, language learning from sociological standpoint, is a lady named Pawlanko. It's Anita Pawlanko. And she was a Polish immigrant into America when she was, I want to say, in her teens. And she wrote a bunch of stuff about her experiences. And what she said was, when you become a speaker of a second language, you have to create a new identity. You don't have a choice. You will make a new identity. And the problem with that identity is when you start, because you can't say anything yet, you're losing your entire self. You lose everything. And not only do you lose power, right? So you lose power and competence. In Korean, even to this day, it is still acceptable for mini-stop employees to laugh at me when I say something a little bit strange. I still can get laughed at by the 17-year-old giving me my stuff at the mini-stop, which is frustrating. But so I have that loss. But more importantly, my self-identity is wrapped up in my language. I'm an English speaker. I'm good at English, you guys. I just want to lay it out there. I am good at English. I understand English. I can speak English. And so I was confident in my English, but I lost it. So no matter what, if you speak your second language, you will lose a huge amount of yourself. And by the way, cultural stuff, lots of cultural references that you carried with you, they're gone. There are things that I want to say in English, but I want to say them in Korean. They don't exist in Korean, and those concepts don't exist. The one I'll say, and I'll probably go to jail now, Americans are really big into drug culture, right? There are just jokes that make sense in America, like, he's probably smoking pot again. And we think it's funny, but in reality, like, it's not a thing here. Like, it's not funny. But it's funny in America, and it's funny in English, but it's impossible. So at some point, I just have to lose part of my cultural self in Korean. I don't have a choice. So, if that is true, then let's really fast look at the difference between English-speaking Miranda and Korean-speaking Miranda, which, by the way, is the difference between you when you speak one language, your native tongue, and when you speak your second language. So, we have English-speaking Miranda and Korean-speaking Miranda. English-speaking Miranda is a competent English speaker. Straight up, I speak English good. You knew it was coming. I speak English so good, y'all. I speak English so good. Korean-speaking Miranda is semi-competent. There's nothing I can't say at this point, but there are lots of things I don't say well. There are lots of things that I start and then I'm like, oh, I could have said that nicer, or the pronunciation is weird. There's just nothing I can do about it, okay? English-speaking Miranda is confident, especially in Korea, y'all. I'm real confident in Korea. I can beat all of you guys over here in this second. I can beat all of y'all in English. No question, no question. I'm the best over here, okay? And even with English speakers, I'm not bad. In Korean, I would lose to everybody in this section, I assume. No question. The average 17-year-old on the street speaks much better Korean than I do, much more comfortably. Even though I did my entire master's thesis in Korean, about Korean, I still lose. I still lose. And there's nothing I can do about it. This is really important, you guys. In Korea, guess which language is really, really respected language in Korea? It turns out it is not my Korean. It is not my Korean. It is my English. My English pulls respect, man. Anywhere I go, all I gotta say is articulate. I gotta put some aspiration. Anything you, any aspiration, man, it pulls a lot of respect in this country. Korean-speaking Miranda is sadly not that respected when she speaks Korean. To some extent, but generally it's considered funny. It's generally very funny when I speak Korean. I'm not sure why, but if people gotta laugh, they gotta laugh, right? Let them be happy. So I'm often not respected in my Korean. And in English, I'm considered very professional. Any English classroom I go into, I'm gonna win that classroom because I am an English-speaking professional. Actually, I'm also a Korean-speaking professional. I have certificates to prove so. I have more certificates about my Korean than I do about my English. But I am not considered a professional in Korean often. And most importantly, my English allows me to have higher social standing in Korea. You guys, people who are rich, want to talk to me. People I have no reason to be talking to want to talk to me. Why? Because my English is the language of power in this country in a lot of ways. People who want to go to good universities, people who want to get better jobs, what do they want to learn? They want to learn English. So who are they talking to? They're talking to me. And I have eaten some very expensive dinners because people wanted to talk to me in English. A lot of expensive dinners. My Korean has never done that before me. My Korean is not giving in this relationship. I've been giving it study, and it's just given back a little bit. So in general, our English, as English speakers, one of the problems we'll face is our English has a very high social standing, and it is not pleasant to give that social standing up when you start becoming a Korean speaker. And our Korean identity, you guys, anybody who is learning Korean, who was an English speaker, one of the things you will find out very quickly is your Korean speaking self is the first time you've ever actually been an immigrant in this country. For English native speakers. For Koreans, this is a different situation. But for us English native speakers, us teachers, the first time you actually become a real immigrant in this country is when you start doing real work in Korean. Because up until now, you've been able to just do kind of whatever you wanted in English, and people just, oh, okay, that's okay, until you go into Korean, and then it turns out you suck. You just suck, and they will tell you right away. And Koreans are always impressed by my English, you guys. I don't know why. I don't know if you guys have ever been, I've had clapping before when I spoke English. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I didn't do anything for that. They are almost never impressed with my Korean. In fact, they will typically openly mock it, just because it seems funny. So, this is the situation. If you guys look at these two identities, which one would you pick? Just out of curiosity, anybody really interested in this identity? It's a lower identity, and that's the reason that we're talking about this. Pavlenko says it begins with loss. Well, there's my loss. I am legit a lower class citizen when I speak Korean. There's no question about it. So my self-identity as a Korean speaker is not higher, it's lower. So, my Korean language identity. All of these things I have problems with. I have lots and lots of problems. And if you look at all of these problems, what you can actually come to the conclusion of is, Korean speaking Miranda is kind of dumb. She can't speak very fluently. You guys, I worked for a couple months at a 몰두하게. I was working at I call it a trading firm, but we were selling fruit overseas. That work was really difficult for me because it was the first time I was fully Korean. Everything about me was in Korea with Koreans. I was expected to be like a Korean, and I'm sure you're not surprised to hear I kind of sucked at being a full-on Korean. I'm really good at being partially Korean or like friendly, like pretty Korean Miranda, but being full-on Korean Miranda was really difficult, and I wasn't that great at it. Because I'm not Korean. I'll never be 100% fluent in Korean. There's no way. There's no way to do that. And so, when you go into your second language identity, you just lose a lot of yourself. And you have to come to terms with it because Pavlenko, what she says is that at the final stage of your language identity construction process, you have to come to terms with the fact that you're kind of dumb in your second language. You'll always be awkward. You'll always be that goofy kid over in the back of the classroom kind of, I wonder if professor's going to call on me today because I don't know what he's saying. I haven't known in 3 hours. I don't think I'm going to know tonight. There's nothing you can do. You will never be as good a Korean speaker, well, unless you are Korean, then way to go you. But for us English speakers, we will never be as good at Korean speakers as we are English speakers. There's no choice. We don't have an option. We can't somehow magically become 100% fluent. You don't get fluent like a native speaker in your second language. And you can't typically get the same amount of social status. Typically, you will always be an immigrant when you're dealing in your second language. And because of that, because of all that, you will always have problems in your second language. So Pavlenko says, and I agree 100% with her, when you deal with your second language, the final stage is basically, first you recognize that you've lost everything, then you deal with frustration, anger, and finally, you just accept it. And I spent probably, I want to say, a good 3 or 4 years of my Korean language education process trying to come to terms with the fact that I would never be Korean, which is a really weird thing to say because I do not look Korean. But I really felt like if I just studied hard enough and I just really put it in there, I would eventually become like a Korean in my Korean. If I kept writing and I kept studying and I didn't sleep, I could write a professional paper like my Korean friends. It's impossible. Just lay that out there for you. I mean, it might be. Harsh, are you writing that kind of paper?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sure. Only for Harsh is possible.
No, not possible, but I think it's better than the English speakers, other people from different regions, especially Asians. They are a bit competitive than that, especially Chinese and Japanese.
You gotta fight. I mean, you have to fight for the language, but at the end of the day, you have to come to terms with the fact that you're never going to be 100% Korean. You're not going to be able to. You have to accept that your identity is what it is, which my identity is Korean-speaking Miranda is a little dumb. She's just a little slow. Actually, when I worked at the 몰두하게, this is a sad story, but true. I answered the phones. I don't really know. I guess the boss was kind of a sadist, and she just really wanted me to get fluent really fast, which I was answering the phones for them, and I was like taking calls from like weird fruit vendors out in the middle of Naju, and they would call, and it was these old ajoshis, and they spoke real heavy Satsuri, and they would, and I was kind of sitting there and 네? And they would say it again, and I'm like, oh, 죄송한데 잠깐 기다려주세요. And then I would pass the phone over to my coworker. And I found out later that a lot of the people, and I never knew if this was a compliment or not, it was a compliment to my pronunciation is all it was. A lot of the people calling us thought that they had hired somebody who was slightly mentally challenged. And they legitimately thought, like, why did you hire this person? Like, what did you get her on Parks? Like, was she on sale? Like, why is she like this? And then they were like, oh no, we've just hired a foreign girl from America. We're upclassing ourselves. We're not downclassing ourselves. But all that to say, Korean-speaking Miranda is a little dumb. She is. If you compare her to other Koreans at the same standard as regular Koreans, she's dumb. And that is your second language identity. I mean, I'm not saying you guys are all dumb. I'm just saying when you start speaking your second language, you have to come to terms with the fact it's not your first language, and you'll always be lagging. So, what do you do about all this? I'm not here to tell you guys only bad news. I'm here to tell you good news. The good news is you can learn a second language. I did it. But I am here to tell you that you have to do some really special things. Now, this is specifically for us Americans, Westerners who speak English, because we have some special things attached to us. But first of all, let's talk about Bonnie Norton. I have a lot of really favorite sociolinguistic researchers. I don't know if that's a normal thing for people to have, but I do. I love Bonnie Norton. She did a bunch of really interesting research, and she developed a concept that she called community of practice. A community of practice is basically a place where people of the language you want to speak allow you to speak the language that you want to speak in a useful manner. I'm not talking about, like, GIC has lots of cool lessons where you can go talk to other English speakers in Korean. That's not what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about language exchanges where you switch back and forth between language. That's not really what I'm talking about either. What I'm talking about is a place where the only way you're going to make contact with that person is using the language you want to use. This is a community of practice. It really needs to be meaningful, and that's why I say Korean classes and Korean language exchanges, these aren't actually so meaningful. Like, I mean, we all love Andy and those Sogong books and his real creepy relationships with random Korean girls, but nobody else know Andy? No. He's such a Nikinam is what he is, really. Just a creeper, just straight up creeper is what that guy is. But that's not enough to learn your language. You really have to have a relationship with someone who speaks it, and you have to convince them to speak it to you, which is not as easy as you might think for English speakers. Because while you are looking for your community of practice in Korean, what do you think all the Koreans around you are doing?
They want to learn English.
There it is. They are looking for their community of practice in English, aren't they? So 95% of the time you meet a Korean friend, you guys hang out a couple times, you might speak a little Korean, and at some point you realize, oh, this person really wants to speak English with me. And then you're kind of screwed because now you have this relationship that you really thought was going to be the one, but it's not the one. They really think it's going to be the one. And now you are out of luck. And so that goes back to the idea the speaker of the language really has to be willing to let you speak the language that you want to speak. And in other situations, like if you think about, I'm American, right? In America, typically we want people to speak English. In fact, in Texas, you can often see lots of signs around saying things, because it's Texas, either about guns or about English or no shirt, what is it? No shirt, no shoes, no service, which is apparently a problem in Texas. But we want people to speak English, so when people start trying to interact with me in another language, like if somebody came up to me and started talking to me in Spanish, I would probably just be like, dude, I'm sorry, I want to speak Spanish with you. But here, that is not the case. For our English-speaking friends, have you ever spoke English to somebody at a cafe? Probably, right? In fact, half the time when I go to cafes, before I can get to the counter, I am confronted with, oh, hello, coffee? You want coffee? Yes, I want coffee. Okay, so if the speakers of the language are not allowing you to speak the language, you're still out of luck. And groups of people can be denied access to languages. That's not what's happening exactly in Korea, but there is some of that happening to some extent. And so, to that end, let's talk about your our identity when we are in Korea. The English teacher's actual identity in Korea. The first one, and by the way, my thesis, which I haven't really mentioned yet, my thesis was on why English speakers can't manage to learn Korean. Even though lots of them come here, and they're like, by golly, I'm going to be the one that does it. By golly, I just really love G-Dragon. I really want to have all of his babies. I'm going to learn. I don't really know who's popular. I'm not really K-pop, but I know that I see him a lot, and so I assume that he's the thing. But it doesn't seem to matter. People come here, they're here for about 3 years, struggling to learn Korean, and then at some point they're like, you know what? This is not my thing. And they're out. So, what my people told me when I did this research, I interviewed like 15, 16 various English teachers in this area, and what they all basically told me was everyone I meet sees me as an English opportunity. Everywhere you go, it turns out that if you look American, if you look anything not Asian, really, people will just assume that you are a chance to speak English, and they will try very hard to do that. But this identity, you guys, social identities, they go both ways. So people have identities that they give to me, and I have identities that I give to myself. For any of you who have been English teachers before, I also give myself the identity of English speaking opportunity. Because I teach these kids, right? Like I teach kids. And I know what will happen to them. Anybody who's been here a bit knows what happens to kids who can't speak English in this country. They can't go to nice universities. Like English is like, it's a stop. If you don't speak English, you don't go. You just don't. Like it's not possible. So when I see kids and when they approach me in English, it's real hard for me to not speak English to them, isn't it? Because they could have been my students. They could be my friend's students. And I know what will happen to them if they don't learn this English. So it's really hard for me to say, little Jimin, I don't really want to speak English to you. Speak Korean to me. Okay? It's really hard. So they also typically assume that us English speakers are not able to speak Korean. I don't know if any of you guys who are originally Western or English speakers have spoken to somebody before and had them freak out on you. I have spoken Korean before at places and had people like whip around and be like, and like legit like wig out like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening right now. Or I've had people run away from me and be like, 야, 네가 나와. 이 사람이 영어 해야 하는데 나는 영어 못해. 네가 가야지. 아니 내가 갈 수 없는데. 야, 네가 가야 돼. 공부했으니까. Like this. And it's like 5 minutes of me watching them and eventually 죄송한데 제가 한국어 할 수 있으니까 그냥 도와주시면 안 될까요? Can you please help me? Please, please. I just really want you to help me. I'll talk Korean to you, I swear. So they just assume you can't speak. They just assume you can't speak. And they assume you're short term and that you don't know anything about Korea. They still tell me kimchi is spicy. I don't know what I can do for them. The kimchi, I agree, kimchi is somewhat spicy. I'm from Texas, man. We got hot sauce.
Not spicy at all.
There we go. And Harsh is from India. It's not spicy. So, in general, when they see us, this is what they see. So the likelihood of them giving you a chance to speak Korean is almost nil. In reality, our chance to speak Korean is pretty much nil. And so a lot of you might say, well, then Miranda, sorry you guys, what should we do? Here. Oh my gracious, that is invisible. Okay, well we're going to talk about it piece by piece. I got it here. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what these little boxes say. The first one, so this is basically, you guys, this is how, after all of my research, I put together a chart to figure out what the crap was wrong with us English teachers. Why are we so bad at learning Korean? And this is what I found. Oh,
I'm zooming in.
okay, Anna to the rescue. So, this is how we form our English-speaking, or our Korean-speaking identities. So we start up here at the top with motivation. You guys, I don't know if you know much about language education. There are two types of motivation when you learn a language. There is internal motivation that comes within. This is, once again, I want to have G-Dragon's babies. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness. This is our internal motivation. And there's external motivation, which is your boss saying, if you don't get a certificate in Korean, I'm going to fire you. I want to ask, do any of you think that an English teacher in Korea has external motivation to learn Korean? No, we don't have any external motivation to learn Korean. Nobody has ever been like, Miranda, if you don't get better at Korean, I swear you're out. Nobody cares about my Korean. My Korean has always been a funny little side note in the book of Miranda Teaching English. So there's no external motivation. So when people come to Korea, if they have internal motivation, then they'll start studying. If they have no internal motivation, they don't have external motivation, so they won't study, right? Okay, so then, if they start studying, but let's say you are determined because you love K-pop, some kind of something, or K-dramas. I am older than you would assume, or I'm exactly as old as you assume, depending. So I don't know so much about K-pop or K-drama, but let's say you're motivated and you start studying. The first thing you do is you begin learning, right? Where do you learn? I've met some people who learned on the internet, like they were watching YouTube videos. I myself have been in some of those strange YouTube videos to help you learn Korean. So they're useful. I hope they're useful because I'm making them. But in general, if you don't find a class, you're kind of out of luck. So what I found was people would go looking for classes. And the GIC has wonderful classes. There's a handful of other places to study. But not all of those places are at the right time or in the right location. English teachers in general have really wacky schedules, right? If your public school is not so bad, but all of us Hagwon teachers are all over the place time-wise and all over the place physically because we're all scattered throughout the city. So finding classes is hard. So some people can't find a class and they pretty much don't learn. If you find a class and start learning, then at that point you start creating a second language identity, which is exciting, yay! Except that I told you because with laws. So congratulations, but don't get too excited at first because it's hard and it's going to make you frustrated. And then, what typically happens is, if you're a teacher, is you go to work and you want to use that Korean, don't you? But in reality, you can't. You can't use Korean in an English Hagwon. That's clearly not why you're there. You're not there to speak to them in Korean. You're there to speak in English. So, you're not able to use Korean in a meaningful way at work, typically. If you can't find another place to use Korean meaningfully, you're just out. There's not much else to be done. Like, you're kind of out of luck. So, typically at that point, if people find out there's no meaningful use for Korean, they stop. So their identity springs up and then it just kind of dies, and that's the end of that. Then, after you find a way to use meaningful Korean, which would be, some people initially, right, when you ride a taxi, a lot of times I would ride taxis initially and I would be like, 안녕하세요. 미국 사람이에요. 매운 음식 좋아해요. Like this, and I would make it happen, right? I was like going, like you can run off of that taxi cab driver Korean for some amount of time. You can, and at the mart down the street, I would make friends with the ajumas running the mart down the street, and they would give me extra whatever they had, and you can run off of that for a bit as well if you're starting out. Then, after a while, you start to find out that your English teacher identity, the fact that everyone is looking at you and saying, that is an English speaker. I would really like to speak English with her right now. Or, that is an English speaker. I'm really afraid to talk to her right now because it's 95% chance that's English and I don't want that. And running, right? And you get to chase after them to get your shoes. At that point, it starts to hinder your ability to actually use Korean in general society. And that is typically when English speakers begin to say, you know what? This language is not so useful for me, and I'm not sure I want it. Okay? But this is the part that's important to you guys that are actually interested in studying. At this point, you have to find a community of practice. There's not another choice. If you find a community of practice, if you find people willing to talk to you and have a relationship with you in a meaningful way in Korean, then, and only then, you can begin to really build up that identity. Because you can't do it in general Korean society. General Korean society is not really, first of all, Koreans, when they start learning English, they learn it in Korea for a really long time and then they go somewhere, but they can already speak. But we come here, I don't know how you guys came here, I could say for some reason, what was it I could say? 걔가 수영해요. And I could say 걔가 밥을 먹어요 because I was using Rosetta Stone. But I could not say 배고파요. So I could not say anything useful, but I could say, and I could say 모자가 빨간색이에요. But it's not useful. It's not useful, none of that. Because Rosetta Stone is used only outside of the country you're learning in, apparently. So you get here with no Korean. What you can say finally is not that useful. So you have to make people willing to talk to you. And then, if you manage to make people willing to talk to you, you find that community, then you begin to build your Korean speaking identity. And at that point, once you have an identity, once you've built it a bit, it can go out into the general Korean population and not be so difficult for you. Otherwise, what happens is people begin to figure out, Koreans don't really want to speak any Korean to me. I went to the mini stop and I said, 안녕하세요, and she said, do you want some milk with that? And I feel like I don't want to speak Korean anymore. This country makes no sense. Or I went to the store yesterday and I said, 봉추, 봉, 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 추, 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 and they stopped talking to me and just walked away. And so, and that's why, because you don't speak right initially, right? You don't, because Korean speaking Miranda is dumb. And she used to be dumber. She used to be much, much dumber. So you have no choice but to give up Korean study if you're only using it outside. And that's really what I want to push to you today is if you don't find some place to use this Korean other than outside, you will be really miserable in your Korean study because it's not easy to make it happen in the outside general population. So once that happens, typically what people do is they go into the expat community, don't they? Which, by the way, Gwangju has a phenomenal expat community. We have the GIC, we have all of these really cool places filled with expats getting together, doing fun things all the time. And so it's actually pretty easy to live without Korean in this country. What I found to be extremely funny in my research, because I researched half of the people I talked to spoke pretty decent Korean at different levels of Korean, and some, like, a good quarter of them spoke no Korean, like none. And some of them been here like 10, 15 years, nothing. And what was really interesting was they were doing great. In reality, what I found was the ones that didn't speak Korean were much happier. So I don't know what that means. But they were typically, because you're oblivious. No, who knows what that lady's saying to me right now? I know what she's saying, and it's not nice. But when you're not speaking, you're just, and then just go, and you're still so happy. But when you speak Korean, she's saying, like, what the crap are you doing? The other day, my dog, I went to do something with my dog. I was meeting a person, and I forgot to bring a poop bag. The dog pooped out on the street, but I didn't have a bag, and I wasn't just going to pick poop up in my hands. I was just like, maybe no one will see, and we just went. And a car drove by, and he shouted at me, why don't you pick up the dog's poop? In Korean, and I was like, oh. So I sent my husband to get it. This is what I did. But then, like, if I had not spoke Korean, I'd just be like, hi, you too, yeah, I like puppies. Ooh. So Korean doesn't make things easier for you. But what I can say is, it does make things more interesting, and I am more fully involved in Korean now. So, you get a community practice, your identity becomes stronger. If you don't, you end up in the expat community, and then you happily live your life in bliss in the expat community, because you have no idea what people are saying to you, which is not necessarily wrong. And then, as you are working on your second language identity, what you begin to do is build skills to force people to speak to you in Korean. What I found very interesting was people who spoke decent Korean had this really long list of skills that they had created to make people speak Korean to them, which was really, really interesting. But it's because people would keep trying to change back to English, and they had a list of tricks that they would use to make it impossible. Whereas non-speakers had a lot of non-linguistic communication techniques, like, oh yes, when I go to the store and I want to buy a bag, I just type bag into my dictionary, which, by the way, amazing, right? Cell phone dictionaries. Back when I first got here, I had a little slider phone, and the dictionary did not have that much. Now, like, if I can't find it in the dictionary, I can, like, pull up a picture of it. Right? Like, you can do anything with those phones. So they would just go and show a picture, and then the bag would come, and they would be fine, or they wanted to buy, I don't know, a toilet seat, and they would buy them, like, sitting on the toilet and do some actions, and they would get their toilet seat, no problem, right? I was amazed at what my people could do if they didn't speak Korean. You can do everything, everything. Because what is our job here? Language teacher. So what do? We teach people who don't speak English how to speak English with our bodies, because that's all we've got at some point. We're good at it. Okay. So, at any rate, when you have gotten all of these special qualities, if you are learning to speak Korean and you manage to build up these qualities, they make it possible for you to begin building new and better communities of practice. So once somebody builds one community of practice, what happened for me is I built one, and once I built my first community of practice, it led to other communities of practice. And once I built that one, it led to another community of practice. And now, half of the people that I interact with are Korean-speaking people, because all of my communities of practice slowly but surely built that way. So really the first one is the key, because once you get the first one, then at some point, like if you joined Taekwondo, a lot of my people were really into Taekwondo in my research, then the people at their gym would be like, hey, you speak enough Korean, come drinking with me and my friends. And they would go drinking with them and their friends, and then the other friend would be like, wow, you're really cool, give me your phone number. And then they would chat for a couple months, and then they would be in another group of friends. That's how it works. So the first one is the thing, and then once these people found a community of practice, they would just build. Yep. And if not, then you just live without Korean, and it's completely possible, right? Okay, so going ahead if I can. Community of practices. So what I want to say is, if you're really here and you're really determined to learn Korean, what you really have to do is find a community of practice. That is the only way. In my research, a really, really sad thing that came out that really bummed me out is that people who did not find a community of practice never built a second language identity. None. And what was really sad about that was 2 of them came to Korea to learn Korean. We're talking like hardcore internal motivation, like addicted to K-pop, watching K-dramas, like I'm gonna be here until I'm old and shriveled and having like grandchildren, like lots and lots of American Korean grandbabies, like I am determined. And none of them who didn't have a community of practice actually made it. Whereas people who came here and they were like, I don't know, but I guess, and then ended up with a Korean girlfriend, 6 months later had like 5 communities of practice, and somehow were weirdly fluent in Korean. Not fluent, but at least speaking Korean. So that is what I want to say is, if you're planning to be here and speak Korean, you had sure as heck better find a lot of communities of practice. Because what everybody said, and I think this is a really legit statement, the outside world will never accept you. There is no way to fully integrate into Korean society. I do not look Korean. No Korean person has ever assumed that I spoke Korean, except for like the handful of ajumas in my neighborhood. They're not even ajumas, harmonies. I don't think they can see me. I think their eyesight's not good. They just don't know that I'm not Korean. But people are not going to accept you at face value as a Korean speaker, which means if you want to be a Korean speaker, you sure as heck had better make some small groups to keep you happy and together while you're struggling to learn this language. And the thing also, significant others was a really common source of communities of practice, but some of us don't want to date Koreans. I was married, right, so I couldn't pick up a Korean boyfriend on the side. My husband was like, no, not acceptable. So because of that, the other group that you can make, orphanages. There are a lot of people that I researched, the people I interacted with, they were working at like, they did volunteer work at like orphanages. They made good relationships with the kids. It was good for the kids, it was good for them. They went to Taekwondo, they did boxing. Physical stuff is the best way, right? Because you don't have to really speak Korean initially to be able to punch somebody a couple times. And then once they had that community of practice, they started really doing well in Korea. So what should you do? You should look for activities that will be group activities, not one-on-one activities, because those people, if it is one-on-one, the likelihood that they will switch to English on you is large. If it is a group of people, they will not switch because all of the rest of them speak Korean. So even if 2 or 3 of them speak some English, if there's 10 of them together, not all of them can. So group activities, not one-on-one. Don't find individual friends, find groups. And look for positive people to interact with, because if you don't, you're going to go crazy. It's my experience. Recognize that you are not as smart in Korean as you are in English, or whatever language you speak, because you're not. And there's nothing you can do about it, and that's okay because you're not Korean. And you have to come to terms with that and be happy about that, and then study a lot. And at the end of the day, you should at some point manage to say, I speak some level of Korean with some amount of confidence. And that's it. Thank you very much.